My name is Scott Challinor, and this is the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. It is a crisp autumn morning here in the capital when you join us, and joining us on the show today, I'm delighted to say, is Thomas Dunn, the chairman of Orbian. Tom, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Scott, it's a real pleasure to join you this morning. And as you said, it's a crisp autumn morning. I think of nowhere better in the world to be today.
Absolutely. And just, Tom, for those people that may not be familiar with yourself and Orbian, you're a supply chain finance solutions provider, aren't you? And that's sort of a very vague overview of what it is that you do. So just for the listeners, could you just sort of expand on that a little bit more, please?
Absolutely. Yes, Scott, thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Tom Dunn. I'm a Brit. I grew up in Birmingham, and I then joined at quite a young age. I joined JP Morgan, and I worked with them in London and out in the Far East in Australia and in Japan for a number of years. And then I left them in 2003, and I was then shown the opportunity to get involved with a company that was called Orbian, that was based in the US, but had some activities in the UK, that had been founded as a joint venture between the giant US bank Citibank and the German software company SAP. These two organizations had first established Orbian in 1999 with a dedicated purpose of pursuing opportunities in the emerging intersection of supply chain finance. What supply chain finance means, or what supply chain finance involves, is the provision of finance that enables suppliers to best meet the needs of their typically large industrial or retail customers that they are supplying in different countries, different regions, or across the globe. SAP and Citibank had set this business up. By 2003, when I was shown this opportunity, they had decided that they wanted to reduce their ownership, and I stepped in with a handful of other investors, and we acquired a majority stake in Orbian at that time, which over the years has then grown to be now a complete control of the business, held by myself and a number of other investors.
And during that period, what you've essentially helped do, Tom, is instigate a transformation of the business from sort of a minor player into sort of a solidly profitable, fast-growing and widely acknowledged global leader within the supply chain finance field. So what sort of went into making that transformation possible from a personal perspective?
Yeah, there were many sleepless nights, Scott. I can assure you. And just whenever we thought we'd sort of got it cracked, there was then the global financial crisis in 2007. There was the European the Eurozone crisis of 2011. We then had some period of stability, slightly greater stability before, obviously, then the ructions of Brexit, and then the effects of the pandemic over the last couple of years. Kind of all proof of, I think it was attributed to Mike Tyson, the notion that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, we had to, keep our head down as we battled on through some punches. But the key to our success, the success that we enjoy now, has been a absolutely resolute focus on doing one particular thing the best in the world. Many people, many kind of business strategists and thought leaders will say that in order to be truly successful, you need to be the number one or number two in a marketplace. And if you're not that, then you should probably be exiting. Well, Orbian didn't have the opportunity to be number one or number two in the world of supply chain finance, at least at the start. It was dominated by the big banks like Citibank and Bank of America, JP Morgan, BNP Paribas, all of the huge multinational banking organizations. But what we did have the opportunity to be was to be the best. We could be the number one or the number two best in supply chain finance. And we knew that if we just did that and we controlled the things that we could control, we could control our costs, we could control our risk management processes, we could control the technology that we were using. And we would make each of those things the absolute best. We would never lose sight of the fact that the users of our services, the buyer organizations, the supplier organizations, and the markets to which we go to arrange the financing that we need every day, that we are their servants. And we never lose sight of that. And we just strive to be the absolute best in serving their requirements every day. And steadily, that has allowed us to grow. So that over the last 5 years, we've had a compound growth rate across our revenues and across our assets of a little over 20%, which is then translated into a growth rate across our earnings of a little over 40%, compounded every year, which means now that we have become, something of a presence and something of a unique story within the world of disruptive finance providers, insofar we are very profitable and we generate all of the resources that we require for our own expansion, our own capital investment, out of our own cash flows that we're generating.
It just shows the value of finding your niche, that, doesn't it? And the whole reason I actually asked that question, Tom, was because a lot of our regular listeners are of that sort of younger, sort of entrepreneurial mindset, let's say, and they may have that big idea and are thinking of starting their own business, but might be just sort of looking at the economical landscape and thinking, goodness me, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to make a success of myself at this time. But it's important to remember, isn't it, that, some of the biggest businesses out there have sprung from times of economic hardship, and it is possible to sort of get your head down and really succeed in a crisis, because yourselves at Orbian are a prime example, with the many hoops that you've had to jump through with the financial crisis, the Eurozone, Brexit, and now of course COVID.
Exactly. And I think that for people that are thinking about starting their own business, it is very important that you keep the faith, that if you believe that you have a proposition, stay true to that proposition. Doesn't mean that don't be flexible. Don't adjust, as Lord Keynes remarked. When the facts change, you may need to change your perspective. And so not to be bloody minded about things, but on the other hand, you have to have confidence that what you are doing is going to be providing great value for the users, and whether that be consumers that you expect to sell to, or organizations, corporations that you expect to sell to, or governments that you expect to sell to, doesn't really matter. You have to just strive to be, and never lose sight of the fact that you have to be the best. If you're not the best, there are few prizes in vast arrays of business for coming, second or third. When mandates are awarded, they're awarded once, and the lucky loser is just, I'm afraid the pointedness of that expression is the person that came, is that they're the loser, and they don't have the opportunity. So you can spend too much time kind of chase alternative opportunities and just end up coming second too often. Far better just to come first in a niche and actually then use that to build out further success from that platform.
Absolutely right. And I think another key aspect of sort of building a business is being willing to sort of learn from setbacks as well, and not to expect sort of overnight success, because that simply isn't how it works. You've got to put the hours in, the sleepless nights, as you've already talked about, in building up Orbian as a business. That's a prime example of that. And when we think about sort of learning, I suppose the last 18 months with the pandemic has been probably one of the most significant learning curves of our time that we've seen in global industry. In sort of the context of Orbian, is there anything key that you would say that you've certainly learned from this period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things that have become very clear during the pandemic. First of all, as I kind of think about our own operations and activities, that if you build an organization that is firmly rooted in whatever cultural definition you want to have for your company, you you live that and you breathe it, you can then find that the degree of trust that you have in your colleagues and in the entire organization gets magnified and multiplied. So if you'd asked me 2 years ago if I believed that Orbian, and just to put this in context, every day we are running financing and payments processing of well over $100 million every day. You told me that we were going to move that completely out of the office and effectively kind of into everyone's basement, I'd have said, no, that's not going to happen. As it was, we were given about 4 weeks before kind of in anticipation of the first lockdown, and we did it. And the culture and the strength of purpose and of alignment of interest across the organization that we had built over the course of the previous 15 years came to the fore, and everything just carried on moving. I'm not saying that it was utterly seamless, but from the important perspective, every single supplier got every single payment that they were expecting. They received every time they wanted this kind of funding, it was there for them. Every market that we were accessing, every issuance of commercial paper flowed seamlessly. These were the things that were built on these were the rewards that we had for the establishment of a culture of risk management and compliance that had been built up over 15 years. As I turn to the other side of the equation, to our customers and people we were serving, it became very clear in the pandemic that the requirement for resilience in the supply chain was never greater than as revealed by the pandemic. The requirement for suppliers to have timely delivery of funding that enabled them to meet their own demands for their employees, for their own suppliers, to pay their rents, everything else, it became a matter of absolute criticality, and has very clearly demonstrated the value that exists in well-structured, resilient supply chain finance arrangements that act as a very important tool of collaboration and strategic alignment between buyers and their dependent suppliers. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to comment, at least in passing, on, of course, the supply chain finance. Any one of your listeners that Googles supply chain finance is highly likely to come across one of the great scandals of 2021, which was the collapse of Greensill Capital, a company that touted itself as being at the forefront of supply chain finance. In fact, it was far from that. It was operating under a guise of supply chain finance, but doing things that were very far removed from what Orbian or the major banks or anybody else considers to be supply chain finance. I do think that as your listeners, to the extent they have any interest in this, they should acknowledge that sometimes the pandemic also had the effect of revealing who was, in Warren Buffett's expression, swimming without their shorts on.
I think that's very true as well. And just going back to sort of what you said about culture as well there, Tom, I think it's seldom been under the microscope more than it is now, because when we are sort of looking at certain sectors and seeing what is sometimes quite a difficult recruitment environment, especially, so many more prospective candidates for roles are looking at things like company culture and what flexibility they're going to be offered, whether that business is sort of putting mental health of their employees at the forefront of their considerations. And I think that is indicative of a real change in demand for what people want from their employers. And so culture is so important in that, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, but that's true in every business. It's not just true in this business. And I think that, one of the things that as we look at kind of on a broader, UK basis, we think about the challenge, the off-sided challenge. What's the challenge about productivity in the UK? I think a big part of the challenges around productivity sit around challenges around culture. You create a culture in which people feel enabled, feel trusted, but at the same time feel guided by what they're doing, productivity naturally flows from that. It flows from the fact that not only are people prepared to work harder, but that, like, and this now sounds very glib, but to the extent they're working smarter, that is the key to productivity growth. And that is what we have seen. And I know it's what, hordes of other very successful companies see and would cite as being very important to their long-term, well-paced growth. Well-paced growth does not mean growing like gangbusters because you're chasing some sort of private equity valuation or because you think that it's all got to be done too quickly. It's about having measured growth that it has a clear eye on a reasonably far horizon as to where the company is going to be and what the value is going to be and how the interaction between the company and its customers is going to sit 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the future.
Absolutely right. And when we think of sort of mental health as well, something that I touched on there as well, just how important is that within sort of business and organizational leadership now in your view? And that's not just in terms of safeguarding that of those around you, your colleagues, but also taking care of your own as a leader as well and making sure that you're not sort of burning out at the top.
Yeah, and look, it's almost a truism to say that mental health and broader concepts of wellness and of, whether that's work-life balance, whether that is, but it's not just the interaction between the workplace and one's non-workplace. It's all of the interactions that people are confronting every day, whether it's social media, whether it's the pressure to borrow, to consume, whether it's competitive natures of the environment within which people are living. And, there's little that we can do necessarily to address all of those things, but wherever, Orbian can work to help people with work-life balance, help them address issues, provide them with support during times when they might be facing particular challenges. So we're a privately owned business that tries to operate as far as we possibly can in accordance with what I'd almost term like family values, that we embrace the needs or the responsibilities that we have to people that have committed their lives and their careers to working with Orbian. And in response to, in recognition of that, we are very eager or very, very sensitive to wanting to reciprocate that trust that people have in us with a sense of responsibility towards their entire well-being position, without ever being intrusive. This is not to say that we've got that we look to know what people are doing or in any way have any greater involvement than people are ever comfortable with. But we want always people to know that we are there to provide the levels of support, whatever they may require.
Absolutely right, and that's going to be key moving forward into the future. And thinking about what is sort of in the immediate future for us, it's a different picture, of course, across the globe with sort of where the pandemic is. But in the 2021 budget, of course, we heard Chancellor Rishi Sunak talking up the sort of importance of keeping the economy open and the hard-won gains that we've got from that. And that has really incited some optimism within business and British industry, sort of seeing the state of the UK economy and how it's looking to hopefully grow over the coming months. With that in mind, are you sharing that same optimism within Orbian, and have you got sort of big plans over the course of the next 12 months, would you say?
Yeah, so I think if we first of all take kind of a global view, clearly there are some stress points around the globe, both from a kind of geopolitical perspective, also from the logistics of supply chain management perspectives at the moment. Neither of these we anticipate having any impact on our continued growth. We think that we have a business model that actually is, as people face these kind of challenges in their underlying businesses, Orbian has positioned its services, as I say, as this collaboration between buyers and suppliers. And so whether people are moving to more towards, nearshoring or reshoring, they're currently very dispersed supply chains, or whether they're moving from a just-in-time approach of their supply chain to one that is based around a greater degree of flexibility and resilience. Orbian is there to provide that level of support across each of those things. We look at the UK. Many of those considerations continue to be true. But one of the things that we've actually been doing quite a bit of work on over the last couple of months is actually looking at, we generate vast amounts of data, as you might imagine, within the Orbian system, because of all the payments that we're processing and all of the financing flows that we are actually executing. And one of the areas that we decided to take, kind of a deep dive into was looking at the regional bound. We tend to, in the past, we've tended to have a very kind of, countrywide approach. So we say, okay, we do this amount of business in Germany, we do this amount of business in the United States, we do this amount of business in the UK or Canada or Denmark, or wherever it might be. What we decided to do was as a sort of a deep dive analytical process was to take 2 or 3 of the countries in which we have very significant activities, and actually dive now into a regional focus. And one of those countries that we did, and that's been particularly interesting to see, has been the UK. And we're now diving ever deeper and deeper into what is the configuration of our customer base in the UK as we look at things almost on a postcode by postcode basis, but certainly on a kind of, a broader regional perspective of looking at the Northwest, the Northeast, the Midlands, the West Midlands, the East Midlands, Wales, Scotland. And we kind of we look at some of the trends that are happening there. We look at some of the ways, but very importantly, we look at the ways that a regional focus can help buyers, so if you like, the controlling, the sponsoring entity, can use this analysis in order to help any regional agenda that they have. And what we're going to start exploring early in the new year then is the ways that we can use this to assist the government in their leveling up agenda, because this is large amounts of money that are really flowing, that we can facilitate the flow to these without any requirement for, there's no government guarantees or sponsorship or anything else that's required here. It's just part of the way that these flows can be channeled or can be targeted in ways to assist what we believe is one of the 2 or 3 most important agenda items for this government.
Absolutely so. And thinking about sort of where you would like sort of that agenda to be and where you'd like Orbian to be over the course of the next 12 months. By sort of this time in 2022, what are sort of your plans for Orbian? What would you like to have achieved by then, would you say?
Well, I think that, to continue to establish the absolute value, the vibrancy of contribution that well-structured supply chain finance programs can make to the health of large organizations, their suppliers, and regional communities. And if we can do that, this regional focus is one that we're very much targeting the UK. We've done the same analysis in the US. We've done the same analysis in Germany. We've done the same analysis in Canada. We can extend it kind of, as required by our customers. But as we think about the UK in particular, we really feel that there's a very important contribution that we can be making. And by this time next year, I'd like to go to turn around and say, when I was chatting to Scott towards the end of 2021, I identified that this was an area where we wanted to make a contribution. And as I look back now on the previous 12 months, I can see that in addition to having continued to grow the business by 20 or 30% over the course of the year, we have made this clear, we've had this clear impact on this very important agenda item for the government.
And hopefully Orbian can continue to have that profound impact moving forward. And I think as we start to sort of see the next year unfold and we sort of see what kind of trajectory the nation is going in, certainly, I'd love, Tom, to potentially welcome you back onto the programme with us just to see how some of those big plans of yours are coming along, because it is a changing time and it's important to keep tabs on these things.
Great.
Fantastic.
Well, I would welcome the opportunity to come back and you can hold my feet to the fire as to what we've actually achieved over the 12 months.
Yeah, and hopefully it will be a real story of success to share. We are just about out of time on the show today, Tom. So thank you so much for joining us on the programme, and by all means, do continue to take care and stay safe with it all still going on as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, and for all those regular listeners tuning in today that may feel they have their own story to share with us, by all means you can apply to be on the show via leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. We'll of course be back next time hearing another unique story of success and of innovation, and until then, to all of our listeners, take care and goodbye.